So, you know when you walk into a room with total confidence, only to stop dead in your tracks because you completely forgot why you went in there? Yeah, it happens to the absolute best of us. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why that happens by looking at your brain's ultimate CEO, the frontal lobe. It's the architect of your personality, your movements, your decisions, literally the single brain region that creates the vast difference between our complex human experience and, well, the rest of the animal kingdom.
Let's take a quick look at our roadmap. 1. We'll meet your brain's CEO. 2. The anatomy of the command center. 3. Wiring the neural network. 4. How you control behavior. And 5. The science of self-awareness. Let's get into it. Section 1. Meet your brain's CEO. We're starting right at the very front. Actually, if you tap your forehead right now, you're tapping on the protective shield of the exact region responsible for your personality, your complex decision-making, and all your voluntary movements. It integrates motor, cognitive, emotional, and social processes to drive literally everything you do. And man, it takes up a massive amount of real estate to pull this off. A full 20% of your entire neocortex. It's all the tissue sitting just in front of the central sulcus, which is really just the deep groove dividing the front of your brain from the back. That 20%, that is a huge evolutionary investment. I mean, your body devotes a massive chunk of its energy and physical space to this one area simply because it takes an enormous amount of raw processing power to coordinate all of your goal-directed behaviors.
Section 2, Anatomy of the Command Center.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around how this works, I want you to think of the frontal lobe like a massive corporate headquarters, broken down into 3 highly specialized departments. First up, the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO, deciding when and why to act. Then, the premotor cortex acts as middle management, selecting the actual game plan. And finally, the motor cortex is the frontline workforce, executing the action. It's just a brilliant delegation of workload. The CEO makes the big picture decision, hands it off to middle management to figure out the logistics, and then middle management passes it down to the workers on the floor to make it a reality. Let's look a little closer at each of these departments in reverse order, starting right where the physical action happens.
Your primary motor cortex, technically called Brodmann Area 4, sits on a ridge right at the back of the frontal lobe known as the precentral gyrus. This is your frontline workforce. Think about the sheer processing power it takes to just pick up a coffee cup. When you make that decision, this region directly controls your skeletal muscle activity. It fires off these incredibly precise, highly coordinated commands down descending pathways to your spinal motor neurons and cranial nerves, contracting and relaxing exactly the right muscles in your hand, arm, and shoulder to make the movement happen. Sitting just above that functional layer is your premotor cortex, which covers Brodmann Area 6 and 8. So if the motor cortex is the workforce, this is middle management. See, before the motor cortex can execute a movement like reaching for that coffee cup, the premotor cortex has to plan, select, and coordinate it based on sensory input. And this area even includes your frontal and supplementary eye fields. So before your hand even twitches, this middle management region is already shifting your gaze, calculating the exact distance to the cup, and making sure every subsequent physical action is smooth, deliberate, and correctly mapped to your environment. Now we've reached the absolute top of the corporate ladder, the CEO region itself, the prefrontal cortex. And this is divided into its own highly specialized executive departments. First, you've got the dorsolateral region handling logic, reasoning, and working memory. Basically, this is you sitting down and doing a complex math problem. Then there's the orbital frontal region, located right above your eye orbits. This area integrates sensory data, like taste and smell, with emotional regulation. It's exactly what makes you instinctively recoil when you open the fridge and get hit with a terrible smell. Finally, the medial frontal cortex handles your internal drive and motivation. This is quite literally the biological engine that forces you out of bed in the morning when that alarm goes off. Section 3. Wiring the neural network. Now, a corporate headquarters is totally useless without phones and internet, right? Well, in the brain, these are the extensive internal neural pathways that keep all these departments talking to the rest of the body. You can see how the motor frontline just blasts descending memos out to the body. It sends signals directly to spinal motor neurons to move your limbs and to cranial nerve nuclei to control your facial expressions. But crucially, it also coordinates with deeper brain structures like the basal ganglia and the red nucleus. Think of these deeper structures as the brain's built-in shock absorbers or stabilizers. Without them, reaching for that coffee cup would be this jerky, robotic disaster instead of a nice, fluid motion. Meanwhile, up at the executive level,
The prefrontal cortex is taking in a continuous, massive flood of data. It integrates spatial information from the dorsal stream, which calculates exactly where that coffee cup is in space and how to physically reach it. At the exact same time, it's processing object recognition from the ventral stream, confirming what you're looking at, making sure it's actually a cup and not, a dangerous snake. And simultaneously, the orbital frontal cortex receives deep emotional input and threat assessments from the amygdala. So your CEO knows exactly what's happening outside, constantly merging cold, hard logic with immediate emotional context.
But how is all this internal communication actually powered? Well, this entire system is fueled and modulated by dopamine, originating from the ventral tegmental area, or VTA for short. Think of this dopamine as the essential currency, or the high-octane fuel for your brain's command center. It regulates the prefrontal cortex's activity, managing your attention span and how you respond to stress. And it is an incredibly delicate chemical balance. In fact, science shows us that when this crucial dopaminergic fuel line gets disrupted or flooded, the CEO effectively loses control of attention and reality. This precise dysfunction is strongly linked to conditions like schizophrenia.
Section 4. How you control behavior.
So we know the anatomy, and we know the wiring. Let's look at the practical application and see how these neural connections translate into your daily operations. Basically, there are two primary ways you're driven to act. On one side, we have internal cues. This is your working memory in action via the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It's you acting based on your own internal goals, past experiences, or mentally visualizing a puzzle. On the other side, we have external cues. This is stimulus-driven, it's automatic, and heavily regulated by the orbitofrontal cortex. It's why you instinctively reach out to answer a ringing phone without even thinking, or why you suddenly feel incredibly hungry just because you scrolled past a picture of a pizza. Your life is just this constant tug of war between these competing input streams. Beyond internal and external, you also have contextual control. And this is where the brilliance of the orbital frontal cortex and the amygdala working together really shines. They rapidly integrate emotional and sensory info so you can instantly adapt your behavior to fit social norms. It's the exact reason you instinctively whisper in a quiet library, but feel totally free to shout at the top of your lungs on an outdoor playground. And what's wild is that this happens subconsciously in milliseconds. Your amygdala reads the vibe of the room, the orbital frontal cortex applies the social rules, and your behavior is modified without you actively having to think about it at all. Section 5. The Science of Self-Awareness. Okay, we are now stepping way beyond basic movement and entering the realm of human consciousness. And experimental evidence elegantly shows us how our brain handles this incredible complexity. When researchers like Roland and his colleagues asked subjects to perform complex movement sequences, they saw a much higher activation in the supplementary motor cortex. Similarly, a landmark study by DeLiber showed that simply increasing the complexity of a task directly increases activation in the premotor cortex. When researchers look at the data, it tells this really dynamic story. As a task gets harder, you can literally see the brain physically shift the workload up the corporate ladder for higher-level processing. All of this complex processing ultimately culminates in something called autoenotic awareness. This is a truly profound concept. Linked specifically to your medial and orbital frontal regions, it's the incredible mechanism that gives you your very identity. It's your awareness of yourself across time. Just stop and think about that for a second. This biological wiring is exactly what allows you to vividly remember yourself as a child, to project yourself into the future as an older person, and to make complex moral choices today that perfectly align with that continuous identity. It is the absolute highest level of human consciousness.